Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to give you my ABL guide. This is Alliance Battle Legend. Now, I know this game mode's been out for almost a month now, so I have taken my sweet time coming up with this guide, but I did so because I wanted to understand the game mode as deeply as possible before I imparted any tips onto you, on top of the fact that ABX and ABL, that entire playground of game modes, isn't necessarily my favorite in the jungle gym, so it was something that was going to take me longer to formulate a plan for anyways. But anywho, rather than fighting the Frost Beast in ABX, we now go to the hot desert of hell for Surtur in ABL, and the basic mechanics of the fight from ABX are present here. You're going to attack the beast, there are going to be waves of mobs that will spawn, and you're basically trying to do as much damage as possible in the form of score, right? The more damage you do, the more score you're going to get, and you'll see the score goes from the hundreds, right? It's adding up 100s during my regular rotation into the thousands when I am doing my tier 3 rotation, or when I have extra buffs and things like that. However, there is an added layer of depth and complication. There's actually three added layers, I'd say, in total of depth and complication. Unlike the Frost Beast ABX, when Surtur attacks you, he will deduct your score. So you can see here, I'm going to take 17,000 points of damage, of score, another 17, another 17, another 14, and I'm getting some score back by killing the mobs, but I'm also losing score. So this is the first thing I want to cover because it's the one that I've seen people complain about the most. People saying, Alex, I'm playing ABL, but I'm getting like negative score. Like after 3 minutes, I have 0 score. What is going on? What's going on is you're not dealing enough damage, and you're taking too much damage. So it's not simply a DPS check or a damage check the way that Alliance Battle Extreme is, or mostly is. There is an added layer of depth here because when the mobs hit you, it doesn't matter. You can see here, if the mobs hit me, it doesn't do anything to my score. But as soon as Surtur hits me, or even if I stand in some attack that Surtur did from a long time ago, like the flames, I'm going to be losing. Wait, Kamala died, whatever, but I'm losing score. So that's the first thing that I want to point out to you, is that getting hit reduces your score. Therefore, you want to also maximize. You want to maximize your damage because damage converts into score, but you also want to not get hit. And this is a really important part of the guide that I feel like a lot of people are missing. You don't want to get hit by Surtur. So let me show you the difference. Let me show you 2 different rotations for Miss Marvel. One where I'm just doing the most damage that I can, and one where I'm paying a little bit more attention to Surtur and I am avoiding a little bit more of his damage. Because even if you can just avoid 5 attacks during the fight, that's 17,000 points times 5. That's almost 100,000 points that are getting deducted from whatever your score is at the end. And remember, you want to hit those score thresholds so you can get the Awakening Crystals and the Mandalay Gem Fragments. And this tip, I feel like, is especially important for players who don't have a lot of Pierce, who aren't whales, who don't have absolutely stacked accounts, because you're not doing much damage anyways, so your score is not that high. And so not getting hit is going to really be the difference maker. So this is a regular run here where I'm just face tanking Surtur. I'm just doing my rotation. I'm not really paying attention to anything. I'm just, okay, my rotation's ready. I'm going in and I'm doing it. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. Okay. And I end up getting 750 is honestly not bad at all. 750,000 is honestly not bad. Let me show you a different one now. And I may not necessarily get a better score this time around, but if you're doing this with conscious effort over time, you will get better scores. It definitely takes some practice, but let me show you. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run behind him. And then when my rotation is almost finished, I'm going to cancel my 5 into my 1 because it's an iframe. That's going to give me some additional protection because he doesn't hit you in iframe. Iframe is the one piece of protection. And then here, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to run behind him. Right? So up until now, I actually haven't lost any points on my score at all. And here, I'm going to cancel into 1 just before he swings. So this may not be the best example from a score perspective because I actually ended up getting the same score or thereabouts. But in the first example, I sort of got lucky that I was able to overpower the damage that he was doing and the score that he was reducing with the amount of score that I was piling on by attacking. That may not be true for every single day of ABL, and not for every single character that I have. And that may definitely not be true for any of you watching. So I really feel like that second rotation where I was mindful of where he, like I was constantly running around behind Surtur to restart my rotation, and I was also sometimes canceling my 5th skill a little bit early into the 1st skill because it's an iframe, doing that to dodge some of his attacks. I didn't take any point reductions in this one. So I know if I do that, I can consistently get about 450,000 points with this team on this day under these circumstances, regardless of what he does. So dodging attacks is really, I think, an important aspect of ABL, but that is not the only aspect, okay? The second aspect I want to talk about is this cancel phase that he goes into. So he's going to do this twice. He does this once at about 230, and then he does it again at about 110. So twice during the fight, like with the Frost Beast, you're going to need to interrupt Surtur. I'm going to show it to you again here because it's worth repeating. It's exactly like the Frost Beast, where he will stop attacking you, he'll jump to the middle of the arena, and he will initiate a sort of like swinging flame charge up. If you don't cancel it, let me show you guys what it looks like if you do not cancel the skill, right? If you don't cancel the sort of charge up mechanic that Surtur has, he will not only deal a massive amount of damage to you, which obviously deducts a lot of points. It deducts 70,000 points from your score, but then he will also give you a massive debuff. So again, 235, he jumps to the middle, and then right around 228, 227, he's going to start this charge up. Now, if you don't interrupt him, he blasts the screen with fire. You take a bunch of damage. As you can see, Kamala's almost dead, and now I have this nasty debuff. Now, the debuffs that you get are actually different based on the different months or the different the different stages of, not stages, what's the word I'm looking for? The different weeks of canceling. So there's Fracture, there's Shock, and there is Snare. Right now it's Snare, so the debuff that he applies on you is different. Here it decreases my buff effects by 30%. But it doesn't matter because the point is not to let this happen. If you're not canceling the skill, if you're not canceling Surtur's skill, that phase thing, then you should just quit and restart. There's no reason, unless you really have no choice, unless your roster doesn't contain any characters at all that can cancel the effect, you know, then you're sort of out of luck. But if you have anyone on your roster who can cancel, has the snare effect or the fracture effect or whatever, and you can use them on the day, you have to use it. You have to do it properly, and you have to interrupt him, because the penalty for not interrupting is so severe. Like for the fracture season, the penalty is minus 100% crit damage and minus pierce damage. It's horrendously bad. So yeah, I would say this is just an instant restart if you get that debuff applied to you. It's just an instant restart, you're done. However, again, if you're one of the players who just, your roster is very small, you're still building it up and you don't have anyone at all, then at least what I would suggest you to do is just before the explosion, switch characters. Because as you saw there, my Kamala almost died. If you lose your main DPS, you're in bigger trouble. So I would have, in that situation, I would have switched to White Fox, let her die, or let her take the damage, because it doesn't matter who takes the damage, and then switch back to Miss Marvel. Here's the second cancel here. So I'm going to show you guys that he goes into his animation. I hit my third skill, and boom, it cancels. That's what the animation looks like if it cancels. He'll also take a knee, and he'll be weakened there, and then you can just keep piling on the damage, and that's it. You don't get a buff. Actually, I removed the debuff. That's very interesting. So if you miss the first cancel, but you get the second cancel, you remove the debuff that he had applied. That's pretty cool. But again, I would restart. I would restart and reset if you if you fail to cancel because of the penalty. The penalty for not canceling his animation is humongous. Now, that's the first gimmick. In my opinion, it's the second gimmick, but it's the first most obvious gimmick because it carries over from Alliance Battle Extreme. So you got to cancel Surtur twice per battle, once at 235 or 230, and then again at 110. However, on top of that, and on top of dodging his attacks during your regular rotations or going into iframes in order to not get hit, that's, in my opinion, the second gimmick. The third gimmick, and the second major gimmick, is the Odin's Might calculation. So here we're going to have these purple orbs that land, and you're going to collect them, and then in the top right side of the screen it's going to build up this meter, this Odin's Might meter, and your point increase right now is going to be 5% for the first orb, 10% for the second orb, and 15% for the third orb. Now that doesn't seem like much, and it's not that much, but what's important is that you collect all of the orbs. and the orbs always drop at the exact same time, like 255 for the first orb, 235 for the second orb, and so on and so forth. I will put all of the orb times on the screen while I'm talking about this so you can see that and you can note it down. But overall, you're going to want to develop the habit and sort of the memory of knowing when the fourth orb is. Okay, so the first 3 orbs, you're sort of just collecting them as you can. They last about maybe 7 to 10 seconds once they land, so you don't want to let them stay there for too long unattended before you collect them, because they can expire and then you miss them. Okay, and there's only 8 that drop. But what's most important is the 4th orb and the 8th orb. So the 4th and the last orb, because what happens when you collect them is you go into 150% point bonus. So now my points are being increased by 150%. You can see my score is skyrocketing. This is like steroid gamma radiation levels of score. This is where you're going to be making the majority of your score. And remember what I said about dodging attacks and maybe interrupting some of your high damage attacks for iframes? Don't do that during the 150 point bonus. That is the only time where I think it's more beneficial to just go all out. Don't mess up your rotation, don't get crazy, you know, and lose focus, you know, keep things under control. But that's the only time where, especially with someone like Miss Marvel, I'm not going to cancel her 5th skill, because when I have the 150% boost, that boost outweighs the damage and the score deduction that Surtur is applying to me. Again, this is a calculation you need to make as a player and that you need to practice for and sort of tell. But over a long period of time, you know, weeks of doing this and observing it, that is what I've noticed. That for most characters, and especially ones that get hit a lot, like Miss Marvel and Storm, you know, dodging during the regular Odin's Might, when you're anywhere from 5 to 15, dodging makes more sense. But once you get that last orb, just go for it, just gun it. The last orb drops at 30 seconds here, and again, this is your second chance. If you've collected all of the other 3 orbs, this is your chance to really lay it on. So I go from 4 million here to almost 4.5 million. Yeah. So I jack up my score by an insane amount with just one rotation because of this crazy percentage. And you can see there that I was getting hit and I was taking 17k in point deductions, but it doesn't matter because I was making so many more points and getting so many more points by hitting him with the damage on my 5th skill during the Odin's Might maximization. 2 more things I want to tell you about canceling. 1, if you have a striker that has the ability that you need, you can absolutely use that striker. There I use Jean Grey to cancel Surtur. This is why tier 4s are so valuable for ABL, because you can basically circumvent the requirements on very difficult stages where you would otherwise have to cancel with underpowered, weaker characters. So this is where the tier 4 value really comes into focus, because that striker can literally be any character, and if they have snare on the skill, or they have shock, or they have fracture on the skill that they use as a striker, then you can use them consistently to come in and cancel for you, even though in this case Thor does not have any skills with snare. On the other hand, what if your main DPS doesn't have the ability but one of your other characters does? I'm going to switch to Nick Fury here, and I'm going to use his 3rd skill to apply the snare effect. As you can see, as soon as I apply the snare effect, or the fracture, or the shock, as soon as you interrupt Surtur and cancel his charge up, you're going to be able to switch back to your DPS almost instantly. The cooldown was around 12 or 13 seconds, which is the normal cooldown reduction for switching, but it immediately gets refreshed upon successful cancel. So this is another indication that the game mode is designed to, you know, encourage you to build your roster out wide. If you can't afford tier 3s, and let's be honest, a lot of players can't at the current rate that they're being introduced, you can still afford to build these other characters who may only be applying a leadership or a support passive like White Fox or Nick Fury or Hyperion or something, but on these certain weeks, they can cancel, they can apply fracture, they can apply shock, or they can apply snare. So use these to your advantage. You may have to go through and check on the different lists where it says which characters have which effects, and the no restriction days are the most handy for that, because they list every single character who has a snare on their 1 to 6 skills. But you can take note of these and then build up these characters. For example, Beast is a really good early game option for players who don't have a hugely stacked roster, don't have access to tier 4s, etc. Because you can use him to great effect as a leadership for physical damage characters, and then on the shock and the snare days, and maybe even fracture, I'm not sure, you can also switch to him, cancel, and then quickly switch back to your main DPS. The only time where this can be a little tricky is if your main DPS and your switch character that cancels share some sort of team up bonus, because what can happen is if I switch from Jean Grey to Beast and I attack the Frost Beast to cancel, Jean Grey might jump in as a striker, and then I have to wait a few more seconds to switch back to her. This happens a lot with Dazzler, Cable, or Gambit, and Storm on the mutant days because there's so few mutants and they're all concentrated as strikers for each other. So in that case, right after you cancel, in this case, in this example with Beast, my advice to you would be switch to White Fox. And if you've switched to her fast enough, or whoever your support is, then Jean Grey won't jump out as a striker, and then you can switch once more back to your main DPS, who in this case, in this crazy fever dream hypothetical scenario, would be Jean Grey. So there you have it. Now you know how to tackle ABL, from building your roster and having the right characters to apply snare, fracture, or shock, dodging Searcher's attacks so you don't lose a ton of score, collecting Odin's Might at the crucial intervals to boost your score, and interrupting Searcher at the 2 preset times so that you don't get a massive debuff and so that you can get the maximum score possible. I hope these tips have been helpful. All you need to do now is to just put these together in a great combo run and get yourself a high score and get those juicy rewards. And remember, you want those rewards. Oh, I was a little slow there. You want those rewards because you cannot transcend characters without them. Remember, for ABX and ABL, it's all about hitting those score minimums so that you can get at least 50k, which is not that difficult to do for most accounts, I would imagine. You need to get 1 million in ABX in order to be able to be eligible for ABL. So getting 1 million there means you should probably be able to get 50,000 here. But hopefully these tips have been helpful. Aim for as high as you can go, of course, as a sort of earmark or rule of thumb. A lot of competitive players are getting about 4 million plus every single day, with a couple of exceptions. So if you really want to reach for the stars, that's where I would set my sights. And I will have a best teams for ABL guide coming out very soon to complement the best teams for ABX guide that we recently released. So yeah, get those awakening crystals, get those Mandalay gem fragments, get all those characters transcended, and have a blast. I think this game mode's really fun. It combines arcade style scoring with very high skill IQ that you need in practice, and you're rewarded for having that knowledge and having those memorizations of times, and also for having a wide roster. So I do think this game mode is a hit, and I hope that more players will pick it up and practice it and have fun with it so that we can see it developed even further. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.